All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Graciela Noriega Jacoby. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Heart of Florida United Way. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for this legislative overview and update. We have a few featured speakers with us today from United Way Worldwide, which I will introduce shortly. But it goes without saying, over the last several weeks, we have seen a flurry of activity from every level of government in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, from local, state to federal government. This webinar is really going to focus on the federal relief response, the resources and programs coming out of the federal government. Hopefully this will be a little different than from the webinars you've participated on this week that have probably focused primarily on the CARES Act, the most recent legislation that was signed into law. Today we wanted to give you more of a comprehensive overview. So we will be hearing about the Families First Act. We will receive an overview of the CARES Act. We'll take a brief pause to accept any immediate questions you might have, but we'll have a fuller question and answer segment later in the program. We will then resume the program and learn what the conversations are in this fourth round of discussions by members of Congress in relief efforts and aid that they are contemplating to move forward. I will then open it up for that fuller question and answer segment where I would ask you to raise your hand using the Zoom raise your hand feature at the bottom of the screen. I will call on you, unmute you, and you may have to unmute yourself at the same time. And then you can proceed with your question. And then finally, to wrap us up, I will invite Ray Larson, our Senior Vice President of Strategic Investment and Community Engagement, to provide us an update. So with that, I will introduce our featured speakers this morning. We have two folks from United Way Worldwide, Barbara Severino. She is the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at United Way Worldwide. Barbara is responsible for advancing policies that help families and individuals become financially stable. Collaborating with national partners, she supports and enhances the capacity of local and state United Ways to engage in advocacy. And second, we have Sarah Yurgo. Sarah is the Director of Digital Advocacy at United Way Worldwide, where she is responsible for developing digital advocacy and individual engagement campaigns. Barbara, Sarah, I will go ahead and turn the screen over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Just going to share my screen here. We're so excited to be with you guys this morning and really appreciate the Heart of Florida United Way team for setting this up. And just so you know, this PowerPoint will be shared with you after this presentation. So there's a lot of information in here, but all this will be shared with you afterwards so that you have it for your reference. So as I'm sure you all know, there has been a ton happening here in DC over the last few weeks. So we are going to give, like Graciela said, a legislative update, comprehensive overview of all the different legislation that's moved through Congress in the last few weeks and what it all means. So let's see. There we go. So the agenda, which we already went through, this is just kind of where we'll be. We'll pause for questions around the Families First Act and CARES Act overview after the administrative actions and deadline extensions portion, so we can get to those burning questions that you have. So we can jump right in. So the Families First Coronavirus Response Act was the phase 2 legislation is what it's also called, that was passed just about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. It kind of feels like a lifetime ago to me now, but this was really it was the second bill, one of the most comprehensive bills that really provided relief for Americans. So we saw a lot of things around nutrition, health, and then paid leave as well. So some of the things that were included, and really today's overview is really about the things that United Way Worldwide and United Ways around the country have been tracking and working on. And I know that a lot of you have engaged in our advocacy. So the bills, both Families First and CARES Act, are hugely comprehensive. So this is what we're presenting today is really a slice of it and the snapshot of what really is impacting nonprofits and the communities that we serve the most. So in terms of nutrition supports, we saw a lot of nutrition supports included in here. Some special funding for WIC, over half of that $1 billion went towards WIC. And then another good proportion of that went to food banks. We know that lots of food banks are seeing huge needs and are stepping up and responding. So there was $400 million in this bill that went to that. The other thing that really was important in this bill, this is right when schools were thinking about canceling, closing, and so this bill included waivers to allow schools, daycares, adult care centers to be able to provide nutrition services in a much more flexible way in order to respond to the emerging need to close down centers to keep people safe, but knowing that people still need nutrition supports. And then the other one, which was a really big win for United Way Worldwide and all of our United Ways across the country, we have been actively engaged in protecting and strengthening SNAP for a few years now. And one of the things that we've really engaged in, put public comments forward were about some of the proposed SNAP work requirements. And so this bill included a suspension of the SNAP work requirements for the duration of the emergency. So that is really good news for us. In terms of the health provisions, there was a whole lot of things. One of the biggest that you probably have seen is the free coronavirus testing for all Americans. So that includes uninsured, folks who are on Medicaid, folks who have CHIP, so free testing for all. And it also included a provider visit coverage for folks who are on Medicaid and CHIP related to COVID-19 diagnostics. So really note that these free provisions or coverage are really just related to the testing portion of COVID-19. It also included a temporary increase of 6.2% in the amount of federal funds that go to states to support Medicaid. And that's really a temporary increase, like I said, for just during the emergency. Then the other big thing, which was one of the biggest negotiation points, was really around the unemployment and leave benefits. So even at that time, we were seeing huge increases in unemployment numbers, and we obviously know from the news this week that has just increased. So it included significant funding for states to meet their increased unemployment benefits needs, and really particularly processing and administrative support. And Barbara will talk about this a little bit later, but like I said, and like I'm sure you all know, we've seen huge increases just in the last week, and probably expected this coming week when the next numbers are released. So it's likely that this will need to continue to increase the amount of unemployment insurance support that are given to states in order to process all of those. And then really kind of the biggest piece of this legislation was the emergency paid sick leave and emergency expanded family and medical leave, FMLA. So this was really where the big sticking points in negotiations happened. So the good news for nonprofits is that it ended up being set up as a payroll tax credit. So that means that nonprofits are eligible, which is great. It also allows for employers with under 500 employees it requires them to offer the paid sick leave and expanded emergency FMLA. Although there are some exceptions possible for employers that have under 50 employees, you really have to be able to demonstrate that it would mean that your operations are no longer functioning, and the Department of Labor is making those determinations on a case-by-case basis. And so these provisions go through the end of the year this year, so they are temporary for right now. The next two slides are just digging in a little bit deeper into the emergency paid sick leave and the expanded FMLA. I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, but really, since you'll be getting the slides, really wanted you to have kind of what these provisions look like. And particularly the emergency paid sick leave is pretty expansive, and it goes beyond just being the individual being sick or being quarantined for COVID-19. It also has provisions for 2/3 pay for caring for individuals who are in quarantine or caring for children whose school or daycare is closed. So that's they're pretty expansive and really important, and hopefully you have all seen some guidance because these have started to go into effect already. Again, the emergency family medical leave, this was the big point of negotiation. So it ended up being 3 months of job protected leave for caring for a child whose school or daycare or childcare is closed as a result. So there's the first 10 days are unpaid, although the provisions do allow for employees to use other types of leave like vacation time or others that they have. And then there's 2/3 pay for 10 weeks. So really, there are some great resources from the Department of Labor. If you go to their website, they've been continually updating the FAQs, and particularly if you are a nonprofit employer for looking for guidance on how the payroll tax credit is working. They just put out more guidance on what that will look like and how to access that this week. So really would encourage you to look there. So that's the major things that we were tracking and following in the Families First Act. So now we're going to transition to talking about the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act. So this was the Phase 3 coronavirus legislation that passed just last Friday and was signed into law that Friday as well. So this is a huge piece of legislation. If you look at the actual text, it's about 880 pages. So obviously there's no way that we could ever go through all of that. So we'll just be giving some of the highlights, like I said. But really, I wanted to start with this grounding and this quote because I really think it encapsulates really what we've been working for and what you all have been joining with us on the advocacy for. So this is a quote from United Way Worldwide CEO Brian Gallagher from a letter that we sent to Capitol Hill leaders during the week of the negotiations. Really, to me, it urges and it exemplifies exactly what we've been advocating for in the last two bills and really where our focus will be going forward. And so just wanted to share that as kind of the inspiration and grounding for where we've been and where we're going. But really, before I get into all the details, wanted to take a second and to pause and just really say thank you. Your voice was heard absolutely by Capitol Hill. You will see this as we go through the wins, but the nonprofit sector came together like never before, and we were able to speak in a cohesive and unified voice, which allowed us to achieve the wins that we did. So thank you. We know that you were balancing and juggling a lot with responding on the front lines in your communities. And so we appreciate you taking the time to advocate and make your voice heard. Two big key things that I wanted to lift up was, I know that many of you may have signed on for the Langford Amendment. There was a sign-on letter related to universal charitable giving deduction. We saw 3,200 charities from across the entire country sign on to that letter. And while the Senate didn't end up considering amendments, having that broad-based support on that Langford Amendment sign-on letter really solidified the need to keep the charitable giving incentives that ended up being in the final bill in there, and it really sets us up really, really, really well to push forward in the fourth bill to even expand that further. So thank you if you signed on to that. That really mattered. The other big thing is we saw double the level of engagement in the last 3 weeks in calling and emailing Congress than we had in all of last year, in all of 2019. So folks using United Way Worldwide's action alerts to email, call, contact their representatives, that was double the level of engagement in the last 3 weeks that we saw in the whole of 2019. So thank you to all of you who were part of those numbers, who shared that with your networks and really got the word out. We also just saw tremendous efforts on Twitter, the hashtag Relief4Charities, thousands and thousands and thousands of tweets, just keeping the drumbeat going. And we'll talk a little bit about one of the really immediate ways that has been seen and is setting us up really well for the fourth bill. So thank you for flexing your advocacy muscles. Get ready to continue flexing them even more because we have lots more work to do in the fourth bill and probably a fifth bill and a sixth bill as well as we go forward. So what exactly was in the CARES Act? As I said, it was a huge bill. It was $2 trillion. So this is actually a graphic from NPR that I think really illustrates it really well. It is a wide range of different initiatives, programs, supports for businesses, nonprofits, individuals, governments. As you can see here, just lots and lots of funding for a lot of different programs. So in terms of the nonprofit sector, which I know that, as I said, a lot of you joined us with, we had over 200 national charities and thousands of local charities joining together to really use our collective power and raise our voice about the importance of nonprofits in communities, not only as on the front lines of responding to coronavirus, really economic impacts and everything that's going on in communities, but also as a major employer. Nonprofits employ lots and lots of folks in communities, millions of people, and really, I think that message needs to get out on Capitol Hill. So that really was one of the major things that we saw through this. And some of the big wins that we saw was first that nonprofits with under 500 employees can access small business association loans. So this is really the main way that nonprofits will be able to access relief. And that's a huge win for nonprofits to be included in that and eligible for that. And we'll go through some of the specifics around that in a minute. And then a last minute removal of a provision that would have prevented nonprofits that receive Medicaid funds from having access to those SBA loans, which is really the critical relief measure. And that really came because of all the work and all everything that you all raising your voice, that was really this last minute removal in the last few hours of the bill negotiation to get that removed. And we know that's critically important to so many nonprofits that are serving a wide range of folks and do get Medicaid funds in order to support the services that they're providing. And then the other big win, which is a huge win at United Way Worldwide, we've been advocating for several years to expand charitable giving incentives to all Americans. So this bill included a non-itemizer charitable deduction for up to $300 for 2020. So this is a great start. This is the first time that we've really seen a non-itemizer charitable deduction. And so it's hugely, hugely important, and we'll be able to build off this going forward. So you've probably been seeing a lot about SBA loans, small business association loans. As I said, nonprofits with under 500 employees are eligible, which is great. There are several categories of loans available right now. The most advantageous that United Way Worldwide is really encouraging nonprofits to take advantage of is the Paycheck Protection Program. On this slide is a link to the SBA guidance on that. So this loan is a loan to retain full-time employees for 8 weeks. It converts to a grant, so there's full loan forgiveness if all employees are maintained on the payroll for 8 weeks. And then also they added if 75% of the loan is used for payroll expenses due to the expected high usage and high demand for this loan. So it's important to note that it is a first come, first serve program. The applications do open today via an SBA approved lender. We are aware that a lot of lenders are having trouble and looking for more guidance, but there is a sample application. There's one that was released the final application was released last night on the SBA website. It's a fillable form, so really encourage you to continue if this is something that you think your nonprofit can benefit from. Really encourage you to be reaching out to your lender and to make sure that even if they're not processing applications today, that they know that you're interested, that you have all your materials are in, so that then when they do start processing them in the next few days, you're at the front of the line. Or it's a $350 billion pot, but it's expected to go very, very quickly. We also put in this slide deck some additional resources. Our partners at Chamber of Commerce and Independent Sector have been doing a great job of making really easy explainers for nonprofits to break down what's really included and how you go about applying, what your documents are needed, all that stuff. So really encourage you to check those out if this is something that you're expecting your nonprofit may be interested in taking advantage of. So in terms of the non-itemizer charitable deduction, so for those who do not itemize their taxes, they will be able to get up to $300. It is, as I said, temporary for 2020, and it's important to note that it's actually for cash only. So cash actually means cash, credit cards, checks, payroll deductions. So it encompasses all of that, but really the things that are not included in this are stocks, in-kind donations, and donor-advised funds. And so we really encourage you to incorporate this new opportunity for all taxpayers to be able to get up to $300 off on their taxes, to have that above the line charitable deduction. Think about how you can incorporate that into any messaging and fundraising work that you're doing for any COVID relief efforts. And then particularly, as you may be aware, Giving Tuesday Now is on May 5th. And so the Giving Tuesday community is planning to have a Giving Tuesday Now day on May 5th, really to support COVID relief, knowing that so many nonprofits are doing so much in so many communities. So this is really a great opportunity to share about this new opportunity that's open to all donors. In terms of itemizers, so there was one small change. So if folks itemize their taxes, all their giving options remain. So that was not changed. So they can, if folks are giving, if folks are itemizing their taxes, they can continue to give and get a deduction based on all their different giving options. So stocks, donor advised funds, in kind, also like cash donations as well. The big change with itemizers is that there's a adjusted gross income limit of 60% typically, and that is waived for 2020. So that was really the only change there, but all other giving options for those who itemize their taxes are the same. So we also saw tons and tons of funding wins, and this is just a very small snapshot. You'll see at the bottom, I put a link to a full summary. There are pages, actually, I think there's like 4 pages of different programs and funding that were included in the CARES Act. So wanted to highlight a few key ones. The first being $200 million for the Emergency Food and Shelter Program. So this is an additional funding stream separate from the normal phases. So this is great. We know that local recipient organizations that work for, or that are part of the EFSP program, are seeing huge increased need for food, shelter, supportive services. So I'm actually the national board member for EFSP for United Way Worldwide. So I can tell you that FEMA has received the notice of funding. The national board expects to get this EFSP $200 million in the next 30 days. And the national board is actually meeting this afternoon to really talk about how it will be distributed to communities. So don't have any details yet, but expect that we will be looking to distribute it quickly via some type of formula. But like I said, we're meeting this afternoon to really talk about that. But really the goal of the national board is to get this money to communities as quickly as possible, because we know that a lot of LROs are really stepping up in the response that they're doing now. There was also a significant amount of funding for childcare programs. This is really going towards the immediate needs for childcare. We know that there are a lot more is going to be needed, which Barbara will talk about, but really it's going towards emergency staffing, especially for childcare centers that are staying open for first responders. Can also be used for sanitizing childcare centers that are going to be reopening, and then also responding to dips in enrollment because of everything that's going on. So that was good funding. Then 8.8 billion in additional for a child nutrition program. So this is really all the school and feeding programs. A lot of them go through child nutrition. So as you all know, schools and other community programs are continuing to provide meals to children and families. So this is really a really needed addition. And then there was some additional funding for SNAP. Just want to be really cautious about how we're talking about this. So SNAP is a mandatory program. That means the government must provide the funding for whoever is applying. So because of all the economic crisis, the applications for SNAP have increased. So this funding is really to meet that increase in SNAP applications. It is not actually an increase in the benefits amount. And that is something that we'll be looking to, and Barbara will be talking about. So it's really just a way to shore up SNAP and make sure that there's the funding to meet the rising need that they've already seen. So I'm going to go into detail about two of kind of the provisions that I know have been in the news a lot and that folks are, we've been hearing a lot about and know that are kind of key things that folks are tracking. So the first I would talk about was the recovery rebates or individual stimulus payments or economic impact payments or cash support payments or like the check that you're going to be getting, all the different things. It's had a lot of different names. So we've been calling it recovery rebates. So this is a great graphic, just shows who's getting what. So individuals up to 75,000 adjusted gross income will get $1,200, and then couples filing jointly up to 150,000 get $2,400. Every child under the age of 17 is $500, and then it starts phasing out after that. And the Washington Post actually came up with a really great calculator for stimulus payments. So it's really simple to use. So if you want to go in and estimate how much you're expected to receive via the stimulus payments, encourage you to do that, or to share it if you're getting questions from folks in your community about what this all means and how much they can expect. So we know that there have been lots of questions about like, how is this all going to work? How is it being distributed? So I wanted to take a second to talk about that. So it will be based on, if you filed your 2019 tax return already, it's based on your 2019 tax return. If you're like me and you haven't gotten around to filing your tax return yet, then it's based on your 2018 tax return. It will primarily be distributed by direct deposit. So if you have direct deposit on file through your tax returns, you will be expected, that's how you will be getting the recovery rebate or payments. It's expected that that direct deposit will be much faster distribution of funds than the other ways. The IRS has said that they are going to be adding a portal so that if you don't have direct deposit on file but want to add it in order to get access to these payments faster, that's coming. We have not actually seen that portal updated yet. And if you don't have direct deposit because you don't have a checking account or you're just not interested in giving the IRS your direct deposit information, then they will be mailing checks, but it's expected that the checks will take much, much, much longer to be distributed. Also, seniors do not need to file tax returns. So if they get if they're a Social Security recipient, they do not need to file their tax return. That was a big win for us this week. And the Treasury initially said that they would, and then they quickly reversed course after lots of folks raised concerns and complaints about that. And so that is good news that seniors do not have to file. So who's missed in this? So those without a Social Security number will not be getting the stimulus payment. So that includes those with ITINs. You must have a Social Security number in order to get this. And then also high school seniors and college students who are dependents on their parents' tax returns. So that's kind of a big gap that we've seen recently people are talking about. Then the other thing to note is that very low income folks who don't typically file tax returns, or don't have to file tax returns, they will need to file tax returns in order to be able to get access to this individual stimulus payment. So Barbara will talk about some of the work that we're doing around that to make sure that everyone who needs it has access. And then I just wanted to talk quickly about the pandemic unemployment benefits, because this was a huge expansion that we saw in the last bill as well. So critically, it greatly expanded the folks and the categories of folks who are included and eligible for unemployment benefits. So it includes part-time workers, self-employed, so that means gig workers, and then those who cannot work for COVID-19 related reasons. We're being told that you have to self-certify that you can't work for COVID-19 related reasons, but really would check with your state unemployment office for how they're doing that. Additionally, the maximum benefits were increased. And so we saw that the base amount, so it's adding $600 a week through the end of July. So it's the base amount determined by the state plus $600 a week. So in Florida, that the max amount of benefits is $275 a week. So the max amount that folks can get in Florida is $875 a week now, just through July, the end of July. It also added an additional 13 weeks of benefits. So that means now folks have access to 39 weeks of benefits. And so the Florida DEO has actually a really great FAQ document and guide that I was able to find last night. So the link is there, and would really encourage you to check that out for additional resources and questions about this expanded unemployment benefit. So that's really the CARES Act as a whole, but we also wanted to, before we pause to take some questions, go over some administrative actions and deadline extensions that we've seen that are really important. So I'm going to turn over to Barbara to talk about the first one.
Okay, I'm going to keep it short. As Sarah had mentioned, hello everyone, the federal tax filing and payment deadline has been extended. And so it's automatic and it applies to all taxpayers. So you do not need to file any additional forms or request any extensions from the IRS at this time. I will say that as a follow-up from what Sarah had just shared, we are working with our partners. We were really pleased to see the leadership and the professionals at the Treasury and the IRS to do work so that seniors who receive Social Security did not have to file a form to receive their payment. However, as Sarah had mentioned, there are individuals, including low-income seniors and people with disabilities who receive supplemental security income, as well as individuals who receive veteran benefits. And so we are working with our partners right now to encourage a similar action from the Treasury and IRS with regards to these individuals to make it easier for them to receive their payments as well. So there's more to come, and we'll be sure to share that. And that's what I have right now. I know we're running. We'd like to get some questions and dialogue, so I'm going to move to the next item.
Yeah, so this is just a really quick item that the census has been extended to August 14th, but we encourage you to be counted now, and that's really as a result of the field operations having to be paused for the moment. So we can go to questions.
All right, so we are going to have 2 question and answer segments. Just to remind you, this will be for those immediate questions that you might have. The next section of the conversation is going to focus on kind of the round 4 of relief efforts that members of Congress are talking about and will be moving forward. I do see one hand raised here. Jerry Glenn, I am unmuting you if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and answer your question or ask your question.
Sure. So under the SBA loans, I've heard something about a criteria that's needed in order that you have to show some that your nonprofit was negatively impacted by the emergency. If so, what is that? And I was confused as to whether or not that requirement is for the loan or just the forgiveness.
So it's for the loan, but it's really, really broad. And the language is really just about financial hardship. So that really can apply to anything, expected declines in donations, if you have revenue that comes in from programs, other things. So it's really for the organizations to self-certify and to think of themselves, and like think for themselves, you know, what is the financial state of your organization. And so we are encouraging most nonprofits, since we've, you know, expect that most will be impacted over the next few weeks, months, in terms of revenues from declining donations and other things, to apply for this. Barbara, is there anything you wanted to add on that?
I didn't know if there was another question that you had, Jerry. Like, did we answer both of them? I thought there was 2 questions, and I just wanted to make sure.
No, she answered both of them, I think.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Stephanie, you have your hand raised. I have you unmuted if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question. Stephanie, you may have to unmute yourself.
I pushed a button to unmute
Here,
it.
here you go. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Right. This is Cindy. I'm sitting here with Stephanie. You gave a location for further information on the payroll tax credits. I didn't write that down. What was that location?
So the payroll tax credits related to paid leave would be the Department of Labor website.
Okay. And just for my own knowledge, you consider full-time how many hours a week?
You'll have to check the guidance on that from Department of Labor. Do you know, Barbara?
I think it's 40, but I think you should verify.
All right. And seniors, what age is someone considered a senior?
So seniors, in terms of the tax return, is anyone who receives Social Security benefits.
All right.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Cindy.
Yes.
Sarah, Barbara, I did have a question earlier on that posted in the chat box, and this is in regards to the Families First Act. The question is there a restriction on the number of nonprofit employees for the payroll tax credit?
I believe it's under 500 employees as well.
All right, any other burning questions before we go into the next segment? Stephanie, I see you have your hand raised, and then we have Kyle. Stephanie, I'll go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead with your question.
Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, perfect. What if our volunteers get stipend? So it's a more of a instead of a payroll check.
For the Payroll Protection Act, you mean, your program?
Stephanie, your phone was cutting in and out when you had asked your question. We can't hear you at this point.
Okay. If a volunteer gets a temporary stipend or a stipend for a period of time, and it's been given in that either 2019 or 2020 timeline, will that be required? Will that be also like under that same payroll protection? It's not technically payroll, although it's, I don't.
Yeah, so that's a good question that we've gotten from a number of United Ways. And that's really where we said you'll have to check with the lender that you're working with to see what they say. I think if they are on your payroll and considered a payroll expense, they may be included. But really, that's a question that you'll have to talk to your lender about.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Kyle, I see you have your hand raised. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks a lot. When it comes to unemployment benefits, there are some employers that are exempt from paying unemployment. For example, churches. Is there anything in the regs for people whose employers don't pay unemployment benefits and don't receive unemployment?
I don't know, Barbara, if you know. I mean, I know that the CARES Act really expanded who was included to include folks who normally aren't. And so I think like the self-employed is going to be through a payroll tax as well. So church and church employees may be in that bucket, but I'm not sure. Definitely, and unemployment insurance is a new area for us as a team, and really, so not an expert on that. Barbara, do you know?
I don't know, but if it would be possible, we could probably follow up afterwards if Graciela can forward us the contact information.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Kyle, if you want to go ahead and put your contact information in the chat box, I think that'll be the easiest and most effective way for me to grab that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other hand raised at this point, but I do see a question in the chat box from Charlene. And the question is, with regards to the deadline to file taxes, if you are a small business owner, such as a partnership, do you need to file a Form 7004 to request an extension?
Okay, this is for me, and I believe you do not, but would you mind if you forward me her contact information? I just want to verify that because my understanding is that you do not have to file an extension, but I want to verify that, especially because it's about taxes and the federal government.
Wonderful. Charlene, I hope you heard that. I'll message you as well in the chat box, but if you could put your contact information in there. Thank you so much. No other hands are raised at this time, so we can move on to the next segment of the presentation, which is really talking about what are the members of Congress discussing in this fourth round of reliefs.
Exactly. Thanks. So go through this quickly so we can get to other questions, but want to make sure that we have time to really set up what's going on. So what to expect. So right before during the third bill, we saw a House proposal for the third bill that ended up not being the one that was adopted. Really, it was the one that was in the Senate mainly. So we're expecting that that's going to be the starting place for this fourth bill, which is a really good thing for United Way and nonprofit priorities. In terms of timing, the House and Senate are both on recess right now until April 20th. We'll see if they actually come back on April 20th. I think that remains to be seen, but the negotiations are happening now. Really, they want everything and all the negotiations and work to be happening now. And then just really, I would anticipate just coming back to DC to vote for that. So we're really encouraging you to engage with your members while they're home. We've heard that members of Congress are holding town halls, teletown halls, that they're joining different groups. So I think you all with your collective muscle could definitely invite an elected official to come talk with you guys if that's something that you're interested in. You know, they're really looking to be able to share like a lot of the things that I've shared, but what they're doing for Floridians. And so that's a great opportunity to be engaging with them and talking to them. And they need to hear from you as well about what's going on in the community, what your nonprofits are doing to respond. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but in the day after the CARES package, actually, I think it was actually the day of the CARES passage in the House, this bill was introduced. And so it's a bipartisan bill that actually word for word takes everything that we're asking for in our Relief4Charities ask and does that. So this is a great starting point for it to be going in and really just demonstrates the power that the nonprofit community had, that even though every specific proposal that we had asked for wasn't included, there's already really strong bipartisan legislative movement for it. So I'm going to turn it over to Barbara to go through our priorities in the fourth bill.
So I'm going to build on what already has been shared. And so our priorities are listed here, and these are more of our sector ones. And they include the items above. And what I will say with regards to extending the above the line or universal charitable deduction, right now, the recently passed bill, as we've talked about, is a temporary $300 non-itemizer provision. It certainly is a step in the right direction. However, we know that this economic crisis will not be over probably by the end of the year, and we are asking that this provision be strengthened by extending the measure temporarily through 2021. So there will be more to come, including a call to action for sure on this matter. with regards to supporting America's nonprofits, it really is the information that Sarah just shared with regards to the Relief4Charities Act. That's where we're going to be focusing our efforts to support the nonprofit sector. And our leaders are currently working again to see, are there other ways that we can support the work that everyone is doing on the ground level in Florida and across the United States, and be able to have a viable nonprofit sector moving forward. With regards to the emergency appropriation of the $110 million to build capacity for 211, I know that Ray hopefully will be able to share what's going on, and I know that he can also reinforce what we know, which is that based on the current volume to 211 centers, we anticipate a surge of 27 million calls over the next 6 months. And this is a 300% increase over annual call volume. And so that is well beyond the current capacity of the current 211 system. And so these funds that we're asking for will really help to allow 211 to carry out essential communication and response services during this crisis. Sarah, if you want to advance the slide. With regards to VITA, with the extension of the tax deadline, currently it is July 15th. We know that VITA sites do provide a critical service to the community, and we are asking for this emergency appropriation really to do two things. One is to support the program, and also to provide messaging to help us reach non-filers to the requirements that they may need to file to receive the payment, which will really help the community. And so we're working with our partners, and there'll be more to come on that as we move forward. With regards to the temporary increase in SNAP, we know that as low-wage workers lose their jobs, an increase in SNAP will help families by allowing them to put food on the table. And as we also know, it will create a boost in consumer demand for food in the community. The temporary boost that was provided in 2009 with the American Recovery Reinvestment Act was one of the key provisions that helped avert a massive increase in poverty. So we are going to be working on that moving forward. We're also going to be continuing to ask for an expansion in the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. We know that with a recession projected for some time, we're going to be asking Congress to work on these expansions so they provide assistance later this year or next year. And for us, expanding is for workers not raising children at home. This includes individuals over the age of 65, as well as lowering the age of eligibility and increasing the child tax credit to making it fully refundable, which will allow millions of Americans to keep more of what they earn. And then finally, we are also, as we've talked about before, Sarah had mentioned the Child Care and Development Block Grants. And so we are focused on asking for an increasement of $50 billion in the child care system. We know that Congress has taken some action to provide immediate short-term relief to the child care system. However, more will be needed in the coming weeks and months. And child care providers, as you know, are already being forced to close their doors, and child care resources and referral agencies are standing up with care connections for emergency and essential workers, and families are currently unable to pay tuition. So we do need to focus on that, and we will be working with our partners and mobilizing our network with regards to increased investment in this critical work. And then finally, we are, you can see we're asking for additional funds for the FMAP, the Federal Medical Assistance Percentage. And this was during the pandemic. A sharp increase in Medicaid enrollment is expected as low-income individuals lose their employment and have no other health insurance. And by increasing FMAP, which was enacted in the bipartisan Family First Law, which Sarah mentioned earlier, we provide critical relief to states while also protecting healthcare coverage. and we are asking Congress to build on that law. And in recognition of the mounting state fiscal emergency, provide additional temporary increases and matching payments to states, which we know will be critical in easing the financial strain on state budgets during this crisis, and also ensuring that states preserve and protect Medicaid coverage for those who need it and are eligible. One item that is not listed, but that we had talked briefly about, was unemployment insurance. And that is work that we are getting more involved in on a national level, and we will, moving forward, be providing more information on how we as United Way can support that effort and how we can work with our partners like local United Ways and the community to support that critical work. And that's all I have right now. Oh, take action, I apologize. So these are ways that you can be taking action and get involved and connect with your elected officials. I know many of you already are doing that because we've seen the work that you've done. And we just wanted to kind of refresh or remind you of ways that you can do that. As Sarah had mentioned, that includes getting involved with your elected officials and staff, following them on social media, participating in virtual town halls that they are hosting, sharing your stories. We are looking to do a tweet storm day, probably moving forward. There'll also be a sign-on letter, and perhaps if you haven't, consider mapping relationships that your board members and senior staff have with elected officials and decision makers, because we know as we go into the fourth stimulus bill, sometimes things move very quickly. So it's helpful if you can just mobilize or pick up the phone and call someone, because you already know that you have that relationship and you can share why it is so important and critical for the support for the community and the work that you do.
Thank you, thank you. And there's many people who are included on this webinar that are part of our band platform. And if you're not, hopefully I can put a link in here. If not, I'll follow up in an email with the slide deck and the links that have been provided thus far. But the band group did a yeoman's job in doing advocacy work on behalf of our community. So thank you for recognizing that. This is now the time we can open it up for questions and answers. I see one question in the chat bar, which is, can you share the bill numbers on the SOS and Relief4Charities Act?
Yes.
Yeah, so actually the bill was introduced, but because the House went on recess as soon as it was introduced, actually there's no bill numbers yet. So we will be standing by for that. Hopefully it'll be coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions? If you want to go ahead and raise your hand using the raise hand feature. Okay, I don't see any other, oh, I see Catherine. Catherine, went ahead and unmuted you if you wanted to go ahead and answer or ask your question.
Good morning. This is Catherine Ray. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
we can hear you.
I'm Vice President for 211 Services here at Heart of Florida United Way, and we cover 15 counties in Central Florida. And in addition, I'm on the National AIRS, the Alliance of Information and Referral Systems Board of Directors, and a part of FLAIRS, our Florida Alliance of 211. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. Greatly appreciate your wonderful update and the hard work that you do. And I'm so pleased that you have 211s on your radar. I know here we've been experiencing 3 to 4 times our normal call volume daily. So as well as the whole network in Florida nationally. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that you've been doing. 211s are such a critical part of this response. And so we definitely, that is a top priority for us going forward, because we know that need is sorely needed, and that a lot of states are really relying on the 211 to get information out and to triage calls and make sure people have the information that they need.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Sorry, I'm like the tech master and facilitator at the same time.
Doing a
Um,
great job.
Thank you.
Yes.
I want to bring Ray in here to provide us with that 2-in-1 update. Here we go. Ray, I have promoted you to a panelist if you wanted to provide the group with an update on our 2-in-1 call center as well as our Alice Recovery Fund and anything else that you think would be helpful at this time.
Thank you, Graciela. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, I just want to add my thanks to everybody who's joined us this morning and also in this historic time for what everyone's doing to support those in our community. And thank you for the presentation this morning. I think it's incredibly informative. I just wanted to remind everyone of our two major responses from United Way in regard to the coronavirus. As you've heard, what I want to make sure everybody remembers is that 2-in-1 is up and fully operational, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So please be sure to use that and refer clients that are looking for information and referral. As Catherine mentioned, as you heard during the presentation, we, of course, probably like all of you, have seen an incredible increase in the volume of calls that we've received. In fact, just yesterday, we received over 2,900 calls. So we certainly ask people to be patient, but we're working to respond, and all of our 2-in-1 specialists are working remotely. So just a reminder of that. And for you service providers that are on the line, we of course want to make sure that we're giving the most accurate information that we can. So as you stand up programs or programs are changed, please make sure that you're reaching out to 2-in-1 to make sure that our information about your programs is absolutely accurate. The second thing I wanted to share with you about is our Alice Recovery Fund for COVID-19 coronavirus. That is a fund that is meant to support our Alice families in our community that are being negatively impacted by the coronavirus, those that are losing hours or perhaps have lost their jobs. Those interested in applying to the fund can go to our website and fill out an application. I will tell you again, we're seeing a lot of people reaching out for help. Currently, we have over 7,000 applications. In fact, just yesterday, we received 573 applications for emergency assistance. Just to give you some idea of the magnitude of this, that 7,000 applications, if all of them qualify for funding and the maximum, our cap is $1,200, that would be about $8 million. We have raised up to this point either committed or that we're expecting about $1 million, working very hard to continue to find investors and donors to our fund, and are current to those who have applied and working through that as we go forward. So again, just a reminder that that fund is meant to support our Alice families with either rent, mortgage, or utility assistance. And the easiest and best way to apply is to go to the Heart of Florida United Way website, and there's an application there by which people can respond to. Graciela, again, I think it's been a great conversation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray. So that brings us to our time. Sarah, Barbara, thank you so much. The information, I think it was really helpful to have a comprehensive overview of all of the activities, past, present, and future. I think that was a tremendously helpful, and in reminding us the importance of advocacy and how that actually can make a difference in how the charitable sector is included in these conversations and ultimately in these legislation and law. So I thank you both for taking time out of your schedules, presenting to us. For our participants, thank you so much for joining us. I will follow up with you, providing you the slide deck that includes the links, and as well as a few of you who asked very specific questions, we'll get you those specific answers. Have a great day and be well. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.